back when he was playing with one of the middle teams, and he wore a blister on one of his feet, and so it hurt him to run. He just took the shoes off. The story is that he was rounding the bases and so on, and somebody up in the stands hollered out, "Run, you shoeless son of a bitch!" And I don't know. But that's where the shoeless supposedly came from. And from then on, he was Shoeless Joe.
There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who love Old Bay, and those who've never tried it. Because once you taste this Chesapeake Bay seasoning, you'll immediately be turned into a canvert. Old Bay goes great on seafood, chicken, corn on the cob, french fries, pretty much anything. Join the Legion of Canverts in America. Pick up a can today. And before you know it, this could be you. Old Bay, the can that connects us.
And you're passionate about this. Shoeless Joe Jackson, who, of course, is excluded from the Baseball Hall of Fame because of his involvement in the Black Sox scandal. You want to get him into the Hall of Fame, is that right?
Well, I'd like to see him given a chance because his, not treatment, but I think his penalty, he got the most severe penalty that probably any player got with less involvement.
Do you think he was one of probably the greatest players of all time?
Oh, there's no question he was one of the greatest that ever played or swung the bat.
But what about Pete Rose? Do you think they should let him be in the Hall of Fame?
It's a little different case, Pete Rose. Joe Jackson was never convicted in court, criminal court, or judicial.
The next 2-2. Davis to left and will hit! Oh my! It's gone! Santa Maria!
From high atop the Robinson Gearing Studio Complex and straight out of God's country, Pawleys Island, South Carolina, the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network proudly presents Backwards K Pod. And now, here's the host of the show, Jake Robinson.
I never move in slow-mo. Welcome to my dojo. This other bots are so I'm cute like fro-yo. Focus like a GoPro. Ripping up this promo. Check out the scoreboard. Bricks up throwing no-no. It's going. Yo, it's gone. Your heart just stopped. Cause Jake got strong and mighty. Undefeated, I mean it. Pull up the pot, screw it down, then read it. Written, produced, directed, and mixed. Tongue on your lips and Ozzie Smith backflips. Pick a tip, get your chip, get on to it. I got ridiculous pods without forcing it. You sit at home crying like a girl while I spread the gospel around the world. Yo, the pods are written behind tracks that mixed it smooth with the groove to make ears wanna listen. Add a little gut and a rhythm to back it up. Another show to my name, now watch them stack them up. You think another one grab back, but this ain't no act jack. Muhammad's the rhyme, some people trying to be black for that. About time I come out, call the show BKP, now let me turn it out. Yo, name take a St. Born in 71. James, you know what time it is, I'm packing them guns. Yo, experience, I've been a witness to glory, and that's why I collect ball players and their stories. You heard? So, once again, back is the incredible, the pod animal, Jake the Snake Robinson from the Let's Talk Baseball Podcast Network. I'm coming out of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Half man, half podcast machine, back in the Captain Kirk chair, shields down, photons up. Prepare to engage on this week's digital audio program that I call Backwards K-Pod, where we collect ball players and their stories. Welcome back into the dojo. It's a code 187, chapter 187 in the historical, biographical, and ethnological historical counting of the players' chapter. Characters, moments, stadiums, managers, and all the pop culture references that have shaped our perspective and knowledge of this beautiful tapestry of life that we call baseball. I'm Jake Robinson. I got your hookup. Holler if you hear me. What's up, Seamheads? What's cracking? We got a complex biographical topic this week in our second installment of Notorious November here in 2025, with more ground to cover than Jim Edmonds out in center field at the Big A in Anaheim. So I like to get right after it this week. I'm joined this week in the dojo, as usual, with my compadre of chaos, the chocolate tabby of tenaciousness, the feline of ferocity, my boy Gunner, posted it up in the conductor's booth of our BKB Time Travel Steam Diesel, waiting orders to take us down the track towards this week's baseball adventure. If I get all of you stragglers hanging out on the platform here at Terrapin Station to kiss and hug your loved ones goodbye, I can go through my final prep for departure. As I look to the west of Terrapin, I can see into our immaculate Jewel Box Retro Ballpark, down that left field line that disappears at home plate. Our hometown BKP9 have already come roaring out of the dugout in anticipation of tonight's contest. Our starting pitcher has completed his warm-up tosses. He's gone through his progressions. The catcher has unloaded a seed on the bag, going down to second base. The infitters are now throwing that rock around the diamond with a little snap and swagger. And the home plate umpire has cleaned up the dish, raised his mask, and called play ball. As the visiting team's leadoff stick saunters to home plate, that's my cue, as usual, to get this show on the road. I'm calling all aboard, as I will have Gunner set this week's time and destination for July 16th, 1887, Pickens County, South Carolina, for the genesis backstory beginnings of the infamous Shoeless Joe Jackson. So, hurry, step right up, get in where you've been in. You can reside in one of our private boxcars for the trip, or post up in our expansive lounge. Kick off your shoes, open your kimonos. Ladies, rip off those bras, foam in your purse, let the sisters hang, boo. We are amongst family here, and we don't judge. As Gunner has us reaching the necessary quantum speeds needed to hit 6.0 gigahertz on our spectrum analyzer, he's creating vast, anomalous, conversible wormholes to tilt the celestial scales in our favor, blurring the margins of time and reality, all in an effort to get us back to the beginning of the Shoeless Joe Jackson story. And here now, 2025, more than 70 years after his death, Shoeless Joe Jackson is finally eligible for induction into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. The legendary baller was banned from the major leagues 13 years into his career for his role in the nefarious 1919 Black Sox World Series scandal. On May 13, 2025, Commissioner Rob Manfred announced he would officially be removing Jackson from the sports ineligible list. And Manfred's logic was that he determined that the league's punishment of banned players should end after their deaths, thus opening the door for Joe Jackson, the hit king Pete Rose, as well as 15 other former players with the opportunity to return to the good graces of the baseball gods and fans. In a letter written to representatives of Rose's family, Manfred writes that, obviously, a person no longer with us can represent a threat to the integrity of baseball. Moreover, it's hard to conceive a penalty that has a more deterrent effect than the one that lasts a lifetime with no chance of reprieve. And with this stunning historical amendment, Jackson, who was considered one of the baseball's earliest superstars prior to his 1921 ban, will be given consideration for Hall of Fame electors through the Classic Baseball Era Committee, and the group's next meeting will be in December of 2027 to consider candidates for the 2028 induction class. Now, Shoeless Joe Jackson was your typical South Carolina country boy who never learned to read or write much. In his own words, he said, "It don't take school stuff to help a feller play ball." And despite his educational deficiencies, Jackson is widely hailed as one of the game's greatest natural hitters in the history of the sport. A left-handed batter and a right-handed thrower, Jackson was a slim, impressive athlete who stood 6 feet 1 inches tall and weighed a sinewy 200 well-built pounds. And for my metric-using brothers and sisters out there, 6'1", 200 pounds, that's the same as 185 centimeters tall and 90 kilos to give you proper context. He is fondly remembered as the guy who could smash line drives to all corners of the ballpark. He had blazing speed to go along with his line drive bat, leading the American League 3 times in triples. He never won a batting title, but his average of .411 in 1911 still stands as a Cleveland Guardians franchise record, as well as a Major League rookie record. I mean, .411, and he still doesn't win the batting crown. That's insane. Unfortunately, after Cleveland trades the star to the Chicago White Sox, his career ended anonymously because of his involvement in throwing the 1919 World Series. He was expelled from the game in his prime with a slash line of .382, .444, .589 in his career's final campaign of 1920. And because of that, he has never garnered serious consideration or received a plaque in the hallowed halls of immortals, but that may all change in 2028. And here we are, nerds, pulling up safely into the rural backwoods of Pickens County, South Carolina, July 16th, 1887, where George and his wife Martha Jackson welcomed their first child of 8 into the world with the birth of son, Joseph Walker Jackson. His father, George, was a laborer who settled in nearby Greenville soon after Joe's birth, procuring employment at Bread and Mill, a textile factory, and he's earning $125 a day for his services. Brandon Mills stood on the west side of Greenville, and it was there where George and Martha built a home for their growing family and a small domicile owned by the mill. At the age of 7, Joe begins working a full-time job at the mill instead of attending school. While working at the mill, he develops a love for the game of baseball, as Brandon Mills sponsored a sandlot team that faced squads from other mills and factories in the area. At 13 years old, he earns a spot in the starting lineup, and he inherited his father's unusually long arms and excelled at throwing the baseball and squaring up fastballs with a stick in his hand. He taps into the beginning of his legend, and soon he is a renowned baseball savant throughout South Carolina as an outfielder, pitcher, and a home run hitter for the Saturday specials in the Mill League. A local fan of the team, Charlie Ferguson, who was a bat maker in his spare time, finds a 4x4 beam from a strong hickory tree, and he fashions a bat in the lathe that measures 36 inches or 91 centimeters long, and it weighs 48 ounces or 1.361 kilograms. Ferguson then meticulously stained the bat with tobacco juice and presented it to Joe. And Joe instantly fell in love with the craftsmanship and the feel of the bat in his hands. He names her Black Betsy, and the bat will follow him all the way up to the majors. Joe played a few factory games and mill teams around Greenville until 1908, when Greenville obtained a franchise in the Carolina Association in a new Class D league on the lowest levels of organized professional baseball. He signs a contract that year with the Greenville Spinners for $75 a month. $75 in 1908 is worth around $2,641 in the 2025 economy. And Jackson at this time is making $45 a month at the mill, which is worth about $1,500 a month here in 2025. And he tells the Spinners manager, Tom Slouch, I'll play my head off for $75 a month. And although Jackson would learn to trace his name later in life, he signed his first professional contract with the letter X. A force of nature, the athletic 20-year-old Joe quickly becomes the biggest star in the Carolina Association, leading the league with a .342 batting average. He's making mind-numbing throws, catching reckless base runners from center field. He hits line shots all over the field and over the fence, and he's serving as a mop-up pitcher out of the bully. A reporter from the Greenville News tags him with the Shoeless moniker that year when the kid is having problems with blisters on his feet because his cleats were not properly broken in. So he takes the field and stocks his feet, and for the rest of his life, he was known as Shoeless Joe Jackson. And Joe never really cared for the nickname, and later in life, he tells sports writer Furman Bisher, I've read and heard every imaginable yarn you can imagine on how I got the nickname. I never played the outfield in my bare feet, and it was only one game I ever played in stockings feet. But it stuck with me, and probably always will. He also gained a wife that year, marrying 15-year-old Katie Wynn on July 19th, 1908. A beautiful, educated girl with brown hair and brown eyes. And she remained a loyal partner and his wife and the wife to Joe for 43 years until Joe's death. She wrote his letters, managed his money, and read contracts to him in and out of baseball. In August of 1908, Philadelphia A's manager Connie Mack bought out Jackson's contract with the Spinners for $900. $900 in 1908. It has the spending power of around $32,000 here in the 2025 economy. Now, initially, Joe has trepidations about leaving his comfort bubble of South Carolina to go north, and Spinners manager Tom Slouch accompanies the wide-eyed country boy on the train ride to Philly. On August 25th, 1908, Joe makes his major league debut as the Cleveland Nats beat the A's 3-2 at Columbia Park in Cleveland. Jackson singles off Nats hurler Heine Berger in his first at-bat and finishes the game going 1 for 4. But Joe is not enjoying his moment. He's homesick, and 3 days later, he takes a train back to Greenville. He would return to the club in early September, but Philadelphia, a city with over 2 million inhabitants, was a total culture shock for the illiterate country boy. Again, Jackson goes AWOL for the team before the conclusion of the 1908 season, finishing with 3 hits and 23 at-bats. Jackson bounced back and forth between Philly and the minors for the next 2 years. He won batting titles in Savannah, Georgia, and New Orleans in 1910, but he doesn't hit much in a September 1909 call-up. Joe had a deep admiration for the tall tactician, A's manager, Connie Mack, but he didn't get along much with the boys in the clubhouse, many of whom would tease him mercilessly about his Southern heritage and illiteracy. Mack has a coming-to-Jesus moment, and he realizes that Joe has much more to give to the game, and he's just never going to find success in Philadelphia. So, he reluctantly trades Joe to the Cleveland Nats for outfielder Briss Lord and $6,000 in cash in July of 1910. In mid-September, at the conclusion of the New Orleans season, Joe reports to Cleveland. And he fits right into his new environment like a pair of, shoes. See what I did there? Cleveland is a much smaller city than Philadelphia. He fits right into the Naps clubhouse, whose roster is full of Southerners and guys who play in South, so Joe fits in well. Playing right field, center field, Shoeless bats .387 in the final months of the 1910 season, and he claims a permanent spot in the Cleveland lineup. In 1911, Shoeless Joe's legendary career takes off like a rocket when he obliterates American League pitching for 233 hits, 46 doubles, 19 triples, and a .408 batting average. Now, he doesn't win the AL batting title, coming in second to Ty Cobb and his monstrous .420 campaign, but he sets Cleveland franchise records in hits, average, 32 outfield assists, and all three of those records still stand as franchise records here in 2025. His torrid hitting and defensive play had helped lift the Naps to a third-place finish in the American League with an 80-73 record, 23 games behind the pennant-winning Philadelphia Athletics. His amazing bat-to-ball propensity and made an admirer in Ty Cobb, who said, Joe is a grand player and one who will only get better and better. There's no denying that he is the best baseball player in the first year of the big leagues than there has ever been. The great Bambino, Babe Ruth, once told Hall of Fame sports writer Graham Rice that I copied my swing after Joe Jackson. It's pure perfection. Shoeless swung the bat harder than most of his contemporaries, and the players of his era would swear to their dying breath that his line drives, they just sounded different off the bat. During the dead ball era, many players held their hands apart for maximum bat control, and they punched at the ball. But Joe was different. He put his hands together near the bottom of the handle, and he took full cuts at the impending pitch. I used to draw a line in the dirt 3 inches from the plate every time I stepped in the box. I drew a right angle next to the catcher and put my left foot on it exactly 3 inches from the plate, Joe once said. And he would stand inside the box, inside the parameters he had drawn up for himself, be close together. Then he would take one long stride into the pitch, ripping the orb into some gap somewhere with a perfect left-handed stroke. Even though the Naps fell from third place to fifth in 1912, Shoeless Joe bats .395 with 121 runs scored, 226 hits, and 30 outfield assists. He also set the AL benchmark for triples with 26. That would be tied by Sam Crawford in 1914, but has never been surpassed as of 2025. However, Joe once again pitches his second in the batting title to the Georgia Pete's, Ty Cobb, who batted .409 for the Tigers. What a hell of a league this is, retorts Joe to a reporter. I hit .387, .408, and .395 the last 3 years, and I ain't won nothing yet. For a dead ball era player, Jackson had prodigious power. He demonstrates his power stroke on the 4th of July in 1913 when he crushes a fastball from Yankees pitcher Russ Ford that ricochets off the right field grandstand roof at the Polo Grounds before bouncing out onto a nearby street. The newspapers claimed the shot was well over 500 feet. Jackson's .373 average that year was runner-up the Cobb once again for the batting title, but he led the league in hits with 197, 39 doubles, and a .551 slugging percentage, finishing second in the Chalmers Award ballot. Despite being poached for 2 starting pitchers, which left the Naps short-handed on the bump, Jackson resists the temptation to join the newly established Federal League in 1914. The loss of the 2 starting pitchers, the rapid decline in Napoleon Lajoie's play, injuries to Jackson and shortstop Ray Chapman all led to the Cleveland Nats to collapse for the first time in the franchise history. Joe was forced to sidelines for 35 games due to a broken leg. His batting average dipped to .338 with only 61 runs scored and 53 RBI. He also posted career lows in speed-dependent stats such as triples and stolen bases. During the off-season after the draining 1914 season, Joe does a series of traveling vaudeville shows that draw curious crowds throughout the South, and he catches the acting bug. He enjoys the theater life so much that he's got it in his head to retire from baseball and find his calling on the stage. And he probably would have gone through with it had it not been for the protest from his wife, Kate. And she lays the hammer down. She has divorce papers written up, which makes Joe take pause in his decision, and he realizes that the risk outweighs the rewards of such an endeavor. He reconciles with his wife and reports to Cleveland. In May, team owner Charles Summers ordered manager Joe Birmingham to move Joe to first base to make room for rookie Elmer Smith in the outfield. Joe plays 30 games at first base, but the experiment ends when he leaves the lineup with a sore arm. Summers becomes agitated when Birmingham blamed the position switch to the arm's injury, and the owner fires the manager, appointing team coach Lee Fole as the team's new skipper. In 1915, Summers and the Naps are teetering on the precipice of bankruptcy and collapse. And Summer deduces that he can't afford to keep his 2 best players in Joe Jackson and Ray Chapman. The Nats had rebranded during the offseason to the Cleveland Indians after selling Napoleon Lajoie to the A's that off year. In his mind, it feels like he needs to trade at least one of his star players and rebuild around the other. And his decision is hastened when he gets wind that the Federal League offered a multi-year contract at a base salary of $10,000 a year to Joe. Now, $10,000 in 1915 is tantamount to about $325,000 worth of spending power in the 2025 economy. And Summers, fearing that Jackson may bolt for the upstart league, he leaves. He begins soliciting offers for a star cleanup hitter. when presented with the possibilities of being traded, Joe is willing to move on to the next chapter of his life career, saying, I'm in a rut here in Cleveland, and I think we're better off playing somewhere else. Jackson's production had been in slight decline the last 4 years of his stay in Cleveland. The Washington Senators offered a package of young players to Cleveland for his services, but Simmers felt like the math was off, and he respectfully declines the offer and waits for better offers to roll in. And one finally comes in from the Chicago White Sox and owner Charles Comiskey. Comiskey coveted Shoeless, so much so that he sends his secretary, Harry Grabner, to Cleveland with a blank check and explicit orders to go to Cleveland, watch the bidding for Jackson, and raise the highest offer by any club until they all drop out. On August 21st, 1915, Grabner and Summers came to the accord for the services of Jackson. Summers signs Joe to a 3-year extension at his previous salary of $6,000 a year, then sent him to Chicago for $31,500 in cash and 3 players and outfielders Barry Ralph, Larry Chappell, and pitcher Ed Kuiper, who combined had cost the White Sox $34,000 to acquire. So, in terms of the total value of cash and players, the $65,000 transaction was the most expensive deal ever brokered in baseball at the time. $65,000 in 1915, it has the spending power of over $2 million here in the 2025 economy. In the White Sox, Joe finds that he's joining a contending team anchored by the play of future Hall of Famers and second baseman Eddie Collins, catchers Ray Schalk, and pitchers Red Barber and Ed Walsh. Jackson hits poorly by his lofty standards during the last 6 weeks of the 1915 campaign, and some pundits are starting to believe that Joe's career was teetering on decline. But he rebounds in 1916 with a vengeance, batting .341, leading the American League with 21 triples as the White Sox challenge the Red Sox for the league pennant. Now, they come up just short to Babe Ruth and the Red Sox, finishing in second place in the American League. In 1917, the Pale Hosers roar to the league pennant with a record of 100 wins and 54 losses, despite a subpar performance by Jackson, who was hobbled all year after spring training, after spraining an ankle in spring training. Joe's average dips to .277 in early September, but he finishes the month with a flurry of hits, lifting his final batting average on the year to .301. During the World Series, New York Giants manager John McGraw loads his rotation up with 4 southpaws in the series that will go 6 games in a bid to neutralize the potent left-handed bats of Joe and Eddie Collins. But Shoeless bats .304 in the Fall Classic, and he makes a circus catch in right field for Game 1 to set the tone and preserve the opening game win. Red Faber would win 3 games in the series as the White Sox dispatched the Giants 4-2 for their second World Series victory in club history, as well as the last one that they would win for more than 8 decades. Joe celebrated his world championship by using his bonus share to buy a brand new Oldsmobile pacemaker from the dealership near his home in Savannah, Georgia, where he and Kate had moved to after his trade to Chicago. The baseball universe is rocked by the entry of the United States into World War I. Several players enlisted in the military, while others were drafted in the early months of 1918. Joe, as a married man, was granted a deferment by his hometown draft board in Greenville, but after playing in 17 games with the Southsiders, the board reversed its decision and ordered him to report for induction. Instead, Jackson found employment at a Delaware shipyard where he helped build battleships and played baseball. In the hastily assembled Bethlehem Steel League, Jackson was the first prominent Major League player to avoid the draft by opting for war work, a decision that generated a lot of heat by the sporting press, particularly in South Chicago. When two of Jackson's teammates and pitcher Lefty Williams and backup catcher Bert Lynn follow in suit of Joe's footsteps to work in the shipyards instead of fighting in Europe, White Sox owner Charles Comiskey defiantly swears that they will never return to his club, saying, "There's no room on my team for any player who evades the Army draft and settles for war work." But after a dismal sixth-place finish in 1918, and with the Great War coming to its bloody conclusion, he changes his tune. Jackson, for his part, won the Factory League batting title with a .393 average, and he led the Harlem and Hollingsworth team to a shipyard championship. But the controversy permanently damaged his relationship with the Chicago sports writers. With little to no leverage and negotiating power, Shoeless Joe signs another $6,000 a year contract, ostensibly the same salary he had been receiving since 1914, and returns to the White Sox. And that's a salary that would have a profound impact on the decision-making process in the Black Sox White World Series scandal. He's healthy again and leads the team in batting as the White Sox grabbed first place in the American League and held it for most of the 1919 season. Joe finishes fourth in the league in batting with a .351 batting average, his best average since 1913 with 181 hits and 96 RBIs. Red Faber, Chicago's best pitcher, was sidelined by injuries late in the season, but Eddie Seacott goes 29-7, and Lefty Williams posted a 23-11 win-loss record, filling the void created by Faber's maladies, and pitching the Palehosers at a comfortable lead in standings. On September 24th, Jackson drives home the winning run, the pennant-clinching winning run at Comiskey Park, and a 6-5 win over the St. Louis Browns. Now, at this time, the White Sox are widely hailed as the best team in baseball, but behind the scenes, they were one of the unhappiest. The biggest problem facing the team was one that had been festering for several years, and that was the factions and cliques that developed in the clubhouse. Eddie Collins, Red Faber, Ray Schalk, they formed one of these groups while Chick Gandil, Buck Weaver, Fred McMullen, and Swede Risberg were the opposing faction. A third group included Shoeless Joe, Happy Felsch, and Lefty Williams, who avoided the college-educated Faber and Collins like the plague, not necessarily out of animosity, but because they felt intimidated by the duo's book smarts and intelligence. And only their mutual loathing of White Sox owner Charles Comiskey kept the team united. Late in the season, first baseman Chick Gandil hatches a scheme to fix the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. Jackson, according to his own admission, initially rebuffs Gandil's $10,000 offer to throw the classic, but he relents when the first baseman ups the offer to $20,000. $20,000 in 1919, and it has a spending power of around $375K here in the 2025 economy. And that offer was more than 3 times the annual salary he was receiving from the White Sox, a salary that had not increased, and the temptation was too overwhelming. Now, Joe had nothing to do with the planning of the fix. Unlike Gandil, he had no association with the underworld of gambling and nightlife. Joe's participation consisted solely of trusting Gandil, which is a stunning amount of faith in a man he didn't know particularly well. It was an incredible lack of judgment as well as a total failure in character on Jackson's part. Jackson would ultimately only receive $5,000 from the gamblers, financing the fix through Gandil. He would hit .375 against the Reds, but he failed to drive in a run in those first 5 games in the best-of-9 series. And Chicago loses 4 of those games, those first 5 games. The White Sox win Game 6 and 7, but they fell behind quickly in Game 8. Jackson crosses a home run over the right field fence, the only home run hit in the series. But the Reds choked out the Southsiders in a 10-5 win to procure their first World Championship in franchise history. Jackson tied a then World Series record with 12 hits in the series, but 8 of those 12 hits came in the 4 games we know the White Sox tried to win after realizing they had been double-crossed by the bookies. In Chicago's 4 losses before Game 8, he went 4 for 16 at the plate. Before retreating home to Georgia for the offseason, Jackson goes to Comiskey's office in Chicago to speak to the old Roman. Jackson wanted to tell the Comiskey about the fix and possibly return the money he had received. He waited several hours, but Comiskey stayed holed up in his office and never even went out to talk to his player. So eventually Joe would leave without ever conversing with his owner. In February of 1920, team secretary Harry Grabner travels to the Jackson home in Savannah, Georgia, and he signs Shoeless to a 3-year extension worth $24,000 and an AAV of $8,000 a year. And by now, Kate and Joe had invested their money well, as the couple owned a successful pool hall and a dry cleaning business employing over 20 workers. With the money he earned for fixing the World Series, he paid off his ill sister Gertrude's hospital bills. Despite the cloud of suspicion that hovered over the team like a bad fart, Jackson gave one of his finest performances in 1920 with a .328 average, a career-best 121 RBIs, and a league-leading 20 triples. However, amid the growing rumors that the White Sox were continuing to throw games during the 1920 season, Jackson begins to feel alienated from his other World Series conspirators. With the White Sox in the thick of a pennant race entering the final week of the season, Jackson's season and ultimately his career comes to an abrupt end on September 28th, one day after a Philadelphia newspaper published allegations made by gambler Billy Mayhart, who claimed that 8 members of the Chicago White Sox, including Joe Jackson, had helped him and other gambler kingpins to fix the World Series. Later that day, on the advice of White Sox team counsel Alfred Austrian, Seacock, Jackson, and Lefty appear before a Cook grand jury investigating the matter, and the trio testifies about their involvement. Comiskey immediately suspends Jackson and the 6 other players who were still in the team. And despite being acquitted by a trial jury, all later accused ball players, including the now retired Chick Gandil, were eventually expelled from baseball for life by MLB's first commissioner, Kenny Saul Mountain Landis. And the scandal brought a sad and ultimately the end to Joe Jackson's brilliant career. Jackson's lifetime batting average of .356 is the third highest batting average in the history of the game. I'm sorry, it's the fourth highest batting average. And he would go underground playing semi-pro ball, primarily in the South, for many years. For the next several years, Jackson was a draw, and folks regarded him with a cerebral kindness. Fans would be in awe of his ability, even when he grew a sizable paunch around his midriff. He gave the newspapers interviews, making a case for reinstatement, but for the most part, he stayed out of the public eye for the last 3 decades of his life. Joe would eventually move back to his old neighborhood in Greenville, South Carolina, near the Brandon Mill Textile Factory, where he operated a restaurant and a liquor store for many years. He spent a great deal of time teaching the game of baseball to local youngsters, organizing impromptu games, even as he suffered through diabetes, liver, and heart problems in his later years. In September of 1951, the Cleveland Indians honored him by voting him into the Team Hall of Fame. In the ensuing media blitz, Jackson agreed to travel to New York City to appear on Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town television show. However, 2 weeks before the scheduled appearance, Jackson suffers a heart attack and he dies at his home at the age of 64 on December 5th, 1951. He was buried in Woodlawn Memorial Park in Greenville. When it comes to his involvement in the 1919 Black Sox scandal, Shoeless Joe's accounts evolved through time. When the fix first came to light in September of 1920, Jackson, along with teammates Lefty Williams and Eddie Seacott, they abjectly admitted to their roles in the conspiracy, accepting $5,000 of a promised $20,000 to throw the series in return for gamblers' payoff. But once the lawyers get involved, Jackson's story evolved into one of an injured innocent, unaware that his teammates had conspired to fill the Fall Classic until after the fact, making him entirely blameless in the whole affair. Sometimes he had trouble keeping the details of the story straight, and his appearance on the witness stand in support of a civil lawsuit he filed against the White Sox ended in disaster. Joe was cited for contempt by the trial judge and subsequently charged with perjury by the Milwaukee County District Attorney. That charge ultimately went unprosecuted, and Jackson was still protesting his innocence at the time of his death in 1951. The fact that Joe lived in baseball exile as a humbled, sympathetic fella, persistent in his claims of innocence, does not change the historical record. Just based on the evidence alone, the verdict is pretty cut and dry. As admitted under oath, after being confronted with the evidence, Jackson was a knowing participant and perhaps unenthusiastic conspirator in the fix. But damningly, Joe was just as persistent in his demands to be paid in full as the series progressed. In 2015, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred denied a bid to reinstate Joe. In a statement to the Joe Jackson Museum in Greenville, South Carolina, he wrote that the results of this work demonstrates to me that it is not possible now, over 95 years since those events took place and were considered by Commissioner Landis to be certain enough of the truth to overrule Commissioner Landis' ruling. 10 years later, he would come to his Jesus moment and lift a lifetime ban, proving that America, we love the rise of a hero. And And we're also fascinated from their fall from grace. But we are also a forgiving people. And time will tell if that remains true in 2027 when his name appears on a Hall of Fame ballot after 102-year exile. And with that, nerds, this is where I'm going to draw the curtain on this week's bio here in Notorious November. Before I pot these mics down for another week, let's take one last look at those, so amazing stats and accolades the incomparable Shoeless Joe Jackson left behind on his Major League resume. Okay. Joseph Walker Jackson, a.k.a. Shoeless Joe Jackson, born July 16, 1887 in Pickens County, South Carolina, died December 5th, 1951 in Greenville, South Carolina. He's now buried at Woodlawn Memorial Park in Greenville, South Carolina. On August 25th, 1908, the 21-year-old Joe Jackson becomes the 3,085th man in the history of the planet Earth to join the MLB fraternity when he makes his big league debut against the Cleveland Naps, going 1 for 3 while playing for the Philadelphia A's in a 3-2 loss. 13-year Major League career with the Philadelphia A's, Cleveland Naps, and Chicago White Sox. A career WAR of 62.2, 1,332 games played, 4,981 plate appearances, 873 runs, 1,772 hits, 307 doubles. 168 triples, the 26th most triples in the history of Major League Baseball. 54 home runs, 792 RBIs, 202 stolen bases, 81 times caught. 233 strikeouts to 519 walks. 356, 423, 441 slash line. That 356 BA being the 4th best average in the history of the game, behind only Ty Cobb, Oscar Charleston, and Rogers Hornsby. That 423 OBP is the 17th best in baseball history. 2,577 total bases, 940 OPS, and a 170 OPS plus, the 12th highest ever in the game's history. 3 times he was top 5 vote getter for American League Most Valuable Player, 1917 World Champion. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, seamen of all ages, this has been the story of Shoeless Joe Jackson. Again, I want to thank all of you steamheads, nerds, for lending me your ears this week. As Gunner has us racing back up the tracks to get you safely back to your loved ones awaiting your return at Terrapin Station, I can see the Shoeless Joe Jackson bio getting smaller and smaller in the rearview mirrors. So with that, I turn my steely eye onto I never say die baseball hydra. I reach under my commode, grab my katana blade, and with one swift move, I chop a head off that beast, only to see 2 more baseball topics appear in its place. Next week, Notorious November rolls on when I do a profile dig into a man whose potent bat was only matched by his cantankerously intense disposition during the 1990s. Next week, we're going to talk about Albert Bell. But look, the OGs know how I roll in this joint. That's another story for another pod here at Backwards K Pod, where we collect ball players and their stories. Looky, Ain't no hair in my chest, but I'm one tough cubby. I feel like I accomplished my goals retelling the Joe Jackson story this week. I gave you a good baseline to work with. If you want to learn more, it's all out there on the net. So, Biddy Bassi, I came, I saw, I put that meatball out on Utah Street for all to admire, baby. Thank y'all for coming out. God bless, and win the day. Parents, if you see your kid sitting on the couch like a board and unproductive, by all means, do yourself a favor you won't regret laying on your deathbed. Grab yourself a ball and a couple of gloves, then take those fuzzy little nerf herders outside for a game of catch. Me and my boy Charlie Guns, we throwing our Gunnar Hendersons high in the sky, y'all. That's our number 2s, as in peace. See you next week with Albert. Don't call me Joey Bell. For Christ's sake, don't call that dude Joey if you know what's good for you. Albert Bell, ladies and gentlemen, here at Backwards K-Pod, where we collect ball players and their stories. See ya.